All right, welcome back. So we're now at the fourth episode of the career development interview for EE323 at KAIST. Hello again, my name is Sungju Lee. I'm a professor here at KAIST, and I'm super excited to welcome Dr. Riccardo Crepaldi. He's a staff software engineer at Google. I'll let him introduce himself, but Riccardo actually interned at HP Labs when I was there, not once, but twice. After the first suffering, he still came back. So he has very high endurance and tolerance. We actually did some interesting works on MIMO and developed something called CSISF, inspired from the TV show. Since he got his PhD, he moved on to Google, and I discovered that he's been working on really interesting stuff for Google Cloud and networks. So we'll hear about that today. So welcome, Riccardo. Could you say hello to the students and others who are watching this interview?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the nice introduction. I have to admit, I don't think I've been called doctor for years. So it's a nice reminder that I was a student in a previous life, and I started my career in Italy. That's where I was born and lived 6 years. That's where I did my bachelor's and master's. As a matter of fact, back then in Italy, we didn't have a bachelor, so it was just a 5 years program to get a master's. And that was in electrical engineering with a concentration on telecommunications, wireless telecommunications. And then I moved to the US to pursue a PhD in computer science, also focusing on wireless networks at Urbana-Champaign. And as you mentioned, that's how I got to explore a little of the industry world, IBM research, and then HP Labs. And then when I had completed my PhD, I came to Google. Google is the first grown-up job, if you will. Yeah, it's been a very fun ride ever since. I've been at Google for 8 years, and I've always been in the same organization called ENGPRO, stands for Engineering Productivity. And if I have to summarize our mission in one line, we try to make Google engineers as productive as possible. I'll tell you more about that, what that means later. The beautiful thing is that when I joined Google Cloud, that just started, we had barely any customer or any big customer. And so even though I stayed in the same organization for 8 years, my job keeps changing and it keeps growing and keeps both being interesting and giving me opportunities to grow.
So which part of Italia did you grow up in?
So my native town is in Padova. Padova is the biggest city of the northeast of Italy. It's about 10 minutes from Venice. Venice is the touristy place that everyone knows. Padova is the bigger industrial place. It's also the place where the first free university in Europe was born in 1300 BC, the one after Christmas, after Christ, AC. Yeah, it was a bunch of students from Bologna, which was the oldest university, but it was run by the church, and they wanted to be free, and so they moved to Padova. So, great place to study.
Right. So, because obviously most of us here grew up in Korea, far from Italy. We hear about it, read about it. Most of the things we know are like beautiful scenery, wine, right? Food, gelato. So why don't you just enjoy life? Why did you have to actually go to university to study? And overall, so what was it like growing up there? Because you feel like it's a tourist attraction. You just travel, have fun, right?
Well, you can, all of Europe really is like that. If it's a small place with a lot of diversity, so you can take a train and get to any beautiful city in a matter of a few hours. Why not just drinking wine and enjoying life? Well, for one reason, enjoying life is expensive. You need to sustain yourself. But I I think I am extremely lucky, and I hope many of your students are as well, because I did my studies, well, maybe after high school. Up to high school, you have to. But after high school, all of my studies were because I really, really loved the subjects I was studying. I loved engineering. I loved radios and telecommunications. I love computer science. So yeah, I would have done it even if it weren't a great job opportunity. And it turns out it's also a great job opportunity. So benefits. Um, but yeah, it was great. The one thing that I loved really about studying in Italy is the atmosphere. As I was saying before, you are studying in places where the university existed for thousands of years, well, hundreds of years. I graduated in the room where Galileo used to teach. And
Wow.
so, even though certainly it was a different time and different everything, it really feels like you are doing something great.
So you mentioned about you're interested in wireless, and that was your, concentration in your, undergrad slash MS joint program. Like, I mean, so did you know from the first year in college that you were going to do wireless networks? And, how did you get attracted to that subject?
I knew I wanted to do networking for many years. I was fascinated. I didn't know that such a thing as distributed computing existed, but I knew I was fascinated about the idea of two machines talking to each other. And you can imagine when I was growing up, two machines talking to each other meant, if you've ever seen War Games, the famous movie, it really meant that. It meant taking a phone and placing the phone next to the computer and hearing noises that made no sense to you, and two machines would be able to communicate. That was really fascinating to me. And so when I had to choose my concentration, I thought telecommunications was great, and there were two options: optical communications and wireless. And optical had a lot of really, really theoretical physics that I felt I didn't quite enjoy as much as seeing things working. The beautiful things about wireless networking is that with a spectrum analyzer, you can actually see the packets on a screen. You can see the electrical signal oscillating, and you can modify, tune it, and that was really interesting to me.
So, so you did well in Italy. You got your joint degree. Uh, like, when did you know you wanted to do a PhD, and why decided to go to the US?
I didn't. I had never considered doing it. And that's because in Italy, um, doing a PhD means becoming an academic. There is
Mm.
no other way, or at least that's what you feel. And I never considered being an academic in Italy. But after graduating, I was lucky enough to work in a research lab run by Michele Zorzi, which is a very famous professor in the wireless community.
Yeah.
And he spent a lot of time in the US. So he was running his lab with a research-oriented approach, experimental-oriented approach. And so after my graduation, I did my thesis with him, and he said, "Why don't you stay and work for a year to as a research assistant, right?" And I did, and we got some interesting work on wireless sensor networks. And one of them got accepted to a conference, which is a pretty good conference in the field, Mobisys. That year it was in Boulder, Colorado. So he said, hey, go and present the work. And we had a demo as well. So I went, I ran my demo, and people were interested. And one person stopped by and said, have you ever considered doing a PhD? And that was the first time I actually considered it.
And
So
who was
it was
that?
a bit serendipitous. Oh, it was no one that eventually became part of my academic career. It was just a trigger. He said, "Have you ever
Okay.
considered?" And my answer was, "Not until now."
So it was like a random person you ran into a conference that actually impacted your life.
That's true. Yeah.
Wow. So that I didn't know.
I have to say there might have been something about being in Boulder, which is, if you don't know where it is, it's this beautiful university in Colorado on the Rockies. And we were having this conference at the football stadium, which happens to be having a great window facing the Rockies, and all these people so smart talking with me. It was really, a great publicity to the field and a great publicity
Mhm.
to the profession.
Mm.
So yeah, that helped.
Wow, that's cool. Cool. So you came to University of Illinois to get your PhD to work with Robin Kravitz, my dear friend. And you mentioned you had some internship not only at HP but also IBM. And these were, at the time, one of the most powerful computing companies at the time. So I mean, you mentioned in Italy you also were in a lab that like to build systems and all that. So I'm guessing you wanted to experience industry in that way. So was that the motivation? And how did you obtain these internships? And did your experience there help you shape your career?
Yeah, very much. So I love the idea of working in industry because uh, the one thing that bothered me about working in research in academia was that you were, especially at the beginning of your career, you're building a prototype that kind of works well enough to give you some data to publish a paper. And then until you found, yeah, you may be very lucky. There are people that create something that becomes a multi-billion-dollar company, but there are few.
Like
Most students
Google.
just exactly, or Spark, or there's so many.
Yeah.
But most students, they just practice doing research a few times with projects that never really quite become anything more than a small prototype. And I wanted to experience something different. I loved coming from an engineering. I really love building things. And so at IBM Labs, I had an opportunity, IBM, sorry, research, I had an opportunity to build a wireless sensor network, which is what I was doing in college. But there, we were building a network for freight trains for the U.S. railway system, and we were building it full scale. So we got access to the rooftop of the research facility, and we laid down a network that was as long as a quarter-mile train, and the experiments were, were real life. Real size, real traffic. And when I proposed to do a demo, my mentor said, well, we may, but industry demos are not like academic demos. They need to be really high quality. And so that kind of captured me. And the same thing was then when I came to HP. The project was real. We were working for an important company that was looking for applications of wireless networks in the field, and we were working with prototypes for wireless cards that weren't out yet. Uh, it was so fascinating to see that whatever I was working on, be it a small part, had a potential to become actually something that people would use.
Right. So, I mean, one of the questions we had was, how did you decide to be a software engineer after your PhD, rather than like academia? But I think you already answered that. But I want to talk about, because I remember, because even after you left your internship, we maintained our relationships. Right, I was part of your PhD committee, wrote reference letters and all that. And I remember you were so excited when you're getting your PhD. You were interviewing these companies, and I won't name all the names of the companies, but you really truly enjoy the interview process, right? Can you talk a little bit about, not just Google, but some of the process you go through, why you enjoyed it, and how you had to prepare for it?
Yeah, you're right. I truly loved it. I mean, we can say the companies if you don't mind. I mean, it's no secret. I interviewed for Microsoft, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Google at the time. The big software companies. And the reason why I picked them, I think it's very important. You're never done learning, of course, and industry is different than industry. And I felt going to a smaller company would have offered a lot less opportunities to learn. You know, you come to Google, now we are 100,000. Back then we were 30,000. Still, lots of talent to learn from. And so yeah, that's why I chose these companies. And the interview process at these companies, it's not intended to trick you. You don't get into a room where people are trying to put you on edge and try to make you make a mistake. They want to know if you're going to be a good person to work with them. So they put you at ease and you have a conversation, to solve technical problems. But it's a conversation that could very much be a conversation that you would have in your day-to-day life at work. And so loving computer science and loving building products, it was really enjoyable to me. The one thing that made it certainly less stressful was that these companies, profession is really, there's a lot of need for good software engineers. So when you come from a good program and a good school, they will try to hire you when you're still a year from graduating, right? So I didn't have any time pressure. I knew that I had many months ahead of me. And so if these interviews didn't go well, I could try in the same company 6 months later. So that was very, very relaxing.
So I think students these days, at least in Korea, they grew up in an incredibly pressured environment, and they're stressed about getting really high GPAs, right? And I was telling them, good GPA might get you an interview, but once you get there, right, it's your skill set, right? And so, and some students try to avoid difficult classes to get high GPAs. But like, what would be your advice? Like if you want to ace a Google interview, right? What kind of skill sets do you need? Are there certain like courses that you recommend, like data structures, operating systems, those kind of stuff? I mean, do you have some tips?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I serve in hiring committees. I've been serving in hiring committees for years. So I see a lot of new graduates packets. You're absolutely right. GPA actually doesn't quite matter. And don't get me wrong, a good GPA means that you're a good student. So aim for a good GPA because that means you're doing well in school. But I don't look at the GPA on a resume. What we look instead is what courses, what experience the student has. What's really important, for example, was what practical experience. A student that throughout their career has had a few internships or maybe just some side projects. If you have a GitHub repository where you have your own personal projects, these things give me a window on your technical skills. And then of course it's your performance during the interview, and the interview is focusing on checking a few aspects of your abilities, technical competence. We tend to hire generalists, so we don't hire you for a specific position. So it's uncommon that I would be asking you, I see that you have a networking class and I would be asking you about networking specifically. It's much more common to ask general software engineering questions, algorithms, data structures. The reason for that is that we promote internal mobility a lot. So I may hire you for a position right now, and in a year time, you might be working on something completely different. And so we want to see that you have the fundamentals, that you know your algorithms, you know complexity analysis, you can make decisions. That's the key differentiator, given that you can solve a technical question. Like there's many books out there, Cracking the Coding Interview or many others. There's Glassdoor, Career Cup, you can find problems. Given that you can take a problem like that and write the code solution, what really makes the difference from a good to an outstanding candidate is if you can offer multiple solutions and show me trade-offs. Things that I like to hear is when a candidate says, okay, you're asking me to design an API that has a read and a write operations, but how will the user be using it? Will it be a million writes and one read or a million reads and one write, because that's going to change how I design my structures to optimize for one or the other. It doesn't matter what the choice is. It's really knowing that you're thinking that way, that you're thinking of how your thing will be used, and that you realize that it's not the optimal solution. That sometimes it doesn't exist. It's the optimal for the use case. It's really important. And other things that practice really helps you with is testing. It's really a great sign if a candidate doesn't just write the code and says, I'm done, but shows me you understand you need to test your code. You need to be looking for ways to break it. This kind of practical experience is really important.
Right. And one thing I might add is also the candidate has to communicate their thought process while solving the problem, right?
Right. So that's another very common pitfall. Everyone hears that. Everyone hears you have to be talking while you're coding. Some people understand that as in reading your code. And so you will go through your code and will tell me, for I equals 1, for I that until I becomes greater than 10. I don't need that. I can read. What I need to hear you saying is, I'm looping through my list here, and this might be linear, but later on, I'm thinking that I could do a bisection. This list is sorted. Talk to me about the important things that you're not writing, and tell me what you're thinking. And there's a double advantage when you do that in an interview. As I was mentioning before, we are not here to trick you. We could actually help you. If I see that you're stuck, I will try to get you unstuck. But if you don't talk to me, if you don't tell me what you're thinking, I don't know that you're stuck, or I don't know what is getting you in trouble, and I cannot help you. So it's really an advantage. And the way you get to this point where you are very good at this is to practice, and practice with your friends. So the great thing about working in a very large program like UIUC was that I could practice with tons of friends that were interviewing at the same time, and I highly recommend that.
Right. So you should also have friends.
You should I mean, by God, college first and foremost, make friends, then study.
Right.
No, it's important. I mean, your connection. I didn't realize it, but the people I was friend with in college, I keep bumping into them at work, in technical conversations outside of work, conferences. It's really a small community.
Right. Right. So let's go into life at Google. I think this is a topic that students are most interested in, because obviously a lot of software companies have caught up, but Google's basically the pioneer in employee benefits, working environment, perks. What are some of the things that you could share that some of the students might not know of?
Well, first of all, I think I should confirm, yes, we do have free food. Yes, we have the game rooms. We have concerts. We have the massage chairs, the nap pods, where if you're tired, you can go. Every year you get 60 minutes of massage from a professional massage for free, and you can buy the rest if you need more. There's a swimming pool outside of my office, gyms in every office. All of that is true. You have it, etc. First years, I think that's great. That's almost sufficient. As you grow, I think you start using less of those resources. It's still great to see them around, but you start being more busy and having less time for a pool game in the middle of the day. But I think there are some other perks that really continue to be great. Certainly, the support we have, the sick policy, for example. I can take any sick day I want for me or my family. If my children are sick, I don't need to tell anyone anything. Just stay home, put it in the system, and say I'll be back when my children are better. The health insurance, I don't know how the health system is in Korea, but here having a good health insurance is really important for your family, and a lot of those perks. Plus, there's the amazing things such as if you are in a remote country and there's a earthquake, our security team will work with you to evacuate you and your family. It seems remote, but I know friends I have a couple of friends that were on the Himalaya when the earthquake struck back in 2017 or whatever it was, and Google sent a plane to evacuate them. It happens. More common, things that you will experience every day. That is great. Google has an open access policy to almost everything. I get access to design documents of most of the products. There are only very, very limited areas of the products or the code that are secretive. I get access to the source code. I can make changes to the source code of most of Google products if I want to. And everyone is very open. So if you have a question for a very high level engineer in a product, you just schedule something on their calendar and they'll be there to talk to you and answer your questions. And of all things, I think this is one of the best perks.
So it sounds like it's a company that not only cares about professional growth of each employee, but their well-being, right?
Correct. Yes. I mean, they are tied, very tied to each other, right? If you're happy,
right,
you are productive, and you're also a loyal employee, if you allow the term, right? You're someone that will really try to do best for the company, and because you feel like you're a part of it. You're not just working because you want the salary. Another perk that I took some notes here. Another perk that I should have mentioned. We have this policy of dog fooding. I don't know if it's a term that I thought of, right? Eating your own dog food. It means before you launch something, try it yourself, and that means that I have access to so many hardware and software products that I haven't launched for a year or two before they launch. Sometimes they never launch because we do cancel a lot of products. So at home I have 7 or 8 Google Home devices and didn't pay for any of them. They don't work most of the times because they're running test software, but when they do, it's fun.
Yeah, which reminds me, one of my students actually asked, do all Google workers use Pixel? But I actually added, do any Google workers also use Pixel?
Many of us do. That's a fun question. Many of us do, and the reason why we do is that that way we get access to Google test products. When we have a new version of Android Auto or of Maps or Photos or whatever, they first launch for Pixel, and so you get access to the products much earlier. But there's no mandate. Lots and lots of people have iPhones, etc.
Right. So another student's question was basically, what's your day like? But in specific, what's the first thing you do when you go to work? Despite all the benefits, obviously it's work, so you would be stressed out sometimes. So where do you go? What do you do to release that stress? Obviously, communication is important at work. So, what kind of channels do you use? So those are some of the questions students asked at Google.
So first thing I do in the morning is catch up with what happened while I was off work. We have a global network of people, not just of data centers. So when I'm sleeping, our people in Poland, we have a team in Poland, a team in India, a team in Canada, and they're all working, right? And so the first thing in the morning is catch up with your emails, catch up with your chat messages, see what happens, see if there's anything urgent that you need to deal with. And then to help with stress, take 30 minutes and make a plan for the day. decide based on what you've read and based on what's on your plate. Make a reasonable plan of what you hope to accomplish for the day, and focus on that. Because the reason for the stress is that there's a lot more to do than time you have. Plus, there's interrupts, continuous interrupts. So if you don't have a reasonable plan, you will just see your pile of stuff to do grow at a faster pace that you can actually deal with it. And that's when you lose it, when you lose hope and you lose confidence in being able to complete the task. So yeah, plan is it's always a great thing. And of course, plan for the unplannable as well, right? So include in your time plan room for the interrupts, room for the things that you don't know are going to happen throughout the day. Take a look at your calendar. That's another thing that I do. I take a look at my calendar for the day and the next day, and I go through all the meetings and I decide which ones I should accept if I haven't yet, and which ones I should reject. Something took me a long time to learn this. You want to be everywhere, right? You're invited and you feel important and you want to be to every meeting, and you end up being in only meetings and you don't have time to do anything. So be very, very responsible for your time. Only go to a meeting if it has to be in person, if you cannot solve it offline, and if you are needed there, or if there's something you can learn from that meeting. The day. And then throughout the day, you were asking if you get stressed, what do you do? If you're just sensing that you're getting stressed, take a break. Take a break, go for a walk, enjoy one of the micro kitchens, get a coffee if you're a coffee drinker. If you're not, become a coffee drinker. Uh, and some, my relationship with my manager is very important,
Right.
because it's like your advisor is like your mentor, and then of course I have also other people. I have a mentor that is coaching me to become a better leader, and I mentor people that are earlier in their career path compared to me. And so, those kind of personal conversations are really helpful when you need to vent. Ping someone that you trust and tell them, I need to vent.
Right.
It's totally okay.
And how do you communicate with your colleagues?
Um, I'm a little bit of an old style person there. Google reopened the office after the pandemic in August, optionally, and I've never missed a day. I actually said, only half jokingly, that if they ever lock down the office again, I want to be locked in. I really love working with people face to face. I feel there's a completely different um, interaction when you are fully physically present, not just in a video. And so, Google is large. In Mountain View, we have about 50,000 engineers. So there's more or less 15 miles or 30 kilometers of buildings. And very often your meetings are with people that are in other buildings. If they are close, if I can walk to them, or if I can take a bike, we have bicycles that we can take. I prefer to take a bike and go to them and meet them face to face. But then, of course, it's not always possible. And thankfully enough, we have been developing tools for communication and collaboration for many years. And so, Google Meet, it's a great tool. Google Chat works surprisingly well. It took us many attempts. If you're familiar with Google Talk, or maybe you're too young for Google Talk, but there was Google Talk, and then there was Hangouts, and then there was Wave, and there were a bunch of products, Google Plus, of course. Chat, I think, is getting it kind of right. We did it a few times, and this time we're doing it right.
Right. So I'm guessing you have an enterprise version of that product that you guys use
Yes,
internally.
we have an enterprise version, which you're probably familiar with Slack, and
Yeah.
it's similar, not as good and feature rich as Slack, but similar in the idea. I personally prefer synchronous communications for tasks that I'm doing during the day. I don't really look at my emails 15 times a day.
Right.
Emails and bug trackers, I like them for things that have a long tail, things that last for multiple days.
Right. So, I mean, this is a new question I have for you now. Like, I mean, do you have alerts from your smartphone? Like, do you like to be known when a message arrives, or do you kind of hold on to it and kind of do a batch processing?
That is a bad habit of mine. Yes, I do have a chat on my phone, even though it's discouraged, and I answer very quickly. I also have my desk. I have 4 monitors, and one of them has a chat client always open. And so, I always want to know if someone is pinging me. Um, it's not recommended.
Right.
I think I do very well. I'm not easily stressed, so it doesn't bother me. But managers are very clear that your time should be yours. So when you walk away from your desk, you're not expected to answer in 30 seconds.
Right. Right.
It's just a matter of work ethics, right?
Yeah.
If you know that there's an emergency, be there, and if you know that you have to go away, let people know. Make a
Okay.
note that you're not available, and
Right.
that's it. That's it.
So you just mentioned you have 4 monitors. Can you tell me what's on each monitor?
Yeah. I have a system. On my right side, I have my email, calendar, and chat. This is a vertical monitor. Then I have a second vertical monitor where I have my documentation open for whatever I'm working on. Then on the large screen in front of me, I have a terminal and a browser window with whatever tools I need to use. And on the left side, I have my video calls because I very often working with people, and so I have a video call open.
I see. All right. That's cool. Now let's talk a little bit about work.
Yeah,
So, so we have actually a very good question from a student of mine. So she actually said, when I read distributed systems paper, right, like especially if it's large scale, uh, it's not easy to understand all the details because not many students would have experience dealing with or managing such systems, right? But it's really important in the systems. One details is important, right? You miss that detail, the system doesn't run, right? So I mean, you feel like you're kind of stuck, right? So I mean, did you have such experience, as a grad student or even as a professional? Like, how did you overcome it? And now that you're at Google managing this, gigantic networks and cloud systems, what kind of knowledge and skills do you think one should have to design such systems?
I have very good questions. So first of all, absolutely, I had that feeling all the time as a student, especially obviously in my first years. But in general, you go to conferences and you hear these people talking about the research and you understand 25, 30% of what they're saying, and you feel so out of place until you realize they've worked months on that research. They know it inside out, and that's why they look so competent on it. You're hearing about it for the first time. So obviously, there are things you don't understand. Um, I was reading this question yesterday, and I was reading a paper, I don't an article, sorry, a newspaper article that for some reason was citing Leslie Lamport,
Mm.
uh, and that made me think of the perfect answer to this question: how do I understand, even though I don't understand every single little detail? I think the key, especially in distributed systems, is understanding the problems, not the solutions. If you understand, I hope you know who Leslie Lamport is. If you don't, go and read the
Go
Lamport.
Google it, right?
Go Google it. Lamport clocks, Paxos. Paxos is one of the reasons why Google exists. Um, you don't have to understand or remember how the solutions work. You need to understand the problems they were trying to solve. The Byzantine failures, the impossibility of reaching consensus, the ways distributed systems synchronize themselves because they cannot have a perfectly synchronized clock, and the problems that happen when your clocks aren't synchronized to the femtosecond, right? You understand these problems, and then when you want to read the solution, you go into the literature and you look for a specific solution, the specific detail, when you know that you're facing that specific problem. So that is my first recommendation. When you're reading a paper, when you're reading something, don't struggle to understand the solution unless you can pinpoint the problem and describe the problem in one sentence. And that then comes useful when you're writing your documentation, because that's how you write good papers and good documentation, is by describing your problem first, or how you expose your dissertation, right? So yeah, that's one thing. Did it happen to me at Google as well? Yes, the first 6 months, my entire time in meetings, we were trying to understand the words I was hearing, what they meant. The first 3 months, I just felt stupid. I'll be honest. You know, Google has this thing that everything is internal. Everything is built internally. We don't use Git. We don't use Jira for bugs. We don't use any of the external tools. We build everything in-house. So names are different, and the first 3 months, you just hear names over names and you don't understand them. The next thing, that's what I think saved me and gave me the kick to start making my progression, was understanding the things I needed to learn and the things I didn't need to care about. There is too much information, and if you're drinking at the hose and trying to understand everything, you will never be able to contribute anything. So the key is, when you are facing a new area, is understanding the domains of this area, the boundaries, what you need to understand. And that keeps going. Just yesterday, now my work is more on the horizontal scale. In a day working on the projects I work on, I can have a conversation about firmware and a conversation about the user interface of Google Cloud, and everything in between. Right? Yesterday, I was in a chat where someone was trying to perform a specific operation and it was failing. And for 4 or 5 times, I tried to offer solutions. And every solution, and these people were junior. And every solution I offered, they were like, yeah, no, already tried, doesn't work, here's why. And at the 4th time, I realized, you know what, these people know what they're doing in their domain. I don't need to be an expert in their area. They are the experts. Let them do it, move along, look at the big picture, look at how the components fit together. That's my role. And let each individual be an expert in their area. And so, yes, there are still a lot of things that I don't understand about the individual components. I just ask the questions when I have them. But what I understand, and what I think it's important to understand, is how all the pieces fit together to get wherever you want to go. You know, faster networks, more resilient virtual machines, whatever it is.
So, I mean, there's like, what kind of skill sets, knowledge would you need to be able to design such systems?
Well, practice, really, lots of practice. And then it depends what you want your role to be. Google, but I think most of the large companies that can have people stay at a specific level, right? They don't need everyone to grow. We have a specific expectation for you to become independent and capable of driving your own work. But there's no expectations that everyone will become a tech lead, or everyone will become a manager, or everyone will become an area lead. And so for some people, it's really important to maintain their coding every day, work experience, and to be extremely knowledgeable in every detail on their area. If that's the kind of person you are, so those are the skills you developed. You develop, faster, better coding, better testing, better problem solving in your area, whatever that might be. Right. So if you're doing networking, of course, you develop more experience in software-defined networking or network protocols. If you're doing APIs, it's more user experience and so on. I chose a different path, so I chose to keep growing in the leadership roles. So I start to abstract from the single technical details, and the skill set that you need to work on large horizontals is the ability to connect the dots and a good intuition. You cannot possibly understand every single detail of everything. So what you need to be able is, with incomplete information, to be able to make the best educated guesses on where the problem might be or what is the most effective way to solve a specific problem. And that is, sometimes they call it soft skills. There's nothing soft about it. It's people skills, the ability of asking questions. That's extremely important, and being curious. Really, when you see something, try to understand how it works. Even if you don't understand every single detail, try to understand the general idea.
One question I want to touch on is that you mentioned when you guys are hiring, you're looking for a journalist who's able to work on different projects. And so once you come in, like, what's the process in terms of when you finish a project? How do you select the next project? How does Google assign individuals for different projects?
There's a few different ways. Generally, there's a lot of bottoms-up approach. There isn't, technical leadership imposing what will be worked on and what not. But leadership sort of defines the priorities. So we know, for example, that in 2021 and 22, one of the highest priorities for Google was higher, developing higher network speeds for our cloud customers and increase our ability to sell non-x86 computing power. What you do to make that happen is really defined in your team. So with that direction, faster network configuration. Let's say we want larger networks. We have a limit of 5,000 VMs per network, and we want to reach 10,000 VMs per network. The networking team will know whether or not there's a small improvement they can do on their system, or if they have to start from scratch and develop the next generation of their component. And so these things are decided team by team. Your focus is, how does my idea match the business goal?
Right. I mean, after all, you're working for a company that's trying to build high quality products. So you have to contribute. And at the same time, the company also tries to match your ambition and growth. And hopefully those are well aligned, right?
Right. And in a company like Google or other larger companies like this, there's this benefit that when you're not interested anymore in the world of, image processing, well, you can move to hardware. You can move to self-driving machines. We have opportunities.
I was wondering, what are some of the interesting or less known tools that you use for development, and how you make your development more efficient, faster, better understandable, better communicate for better communication? Yeah.
Very good question. So there are a few internal tools that we have. So from the editing point of view, we are not prescriptive. I personally am a Vim user, and I have my, that's my idea. Everyone should be programming in Vim, and that's my choice. I have friends that have Emacs, and of course we have fights on a daily basis. And I have friends that are programming Eclipse, and they're okay as well. The things that we really have that are amazing. So keep in mind, Google has a shared code base. We don't have multiple repositories. It's one repository with every line of code in Google. that means that there's thousands and thousands of changes that go in every day. So we have a code review system that's one of the most advanced that I know of in terms of user experience. So it's a very easy. Obviously, nothing can go in without without being reviewed by one or more peers, and one of these peers have to have readability in that language. It means that he's been certified that it can review your coding style and make sure that it matches our style guide, which is not just to keep it pretty. It's the only way I can come in years after you wrote your code and understand it, is if we write in a consistent style. So this process is great. And then we have some amazing tools to run pre-submit and post-submit tests. We have intelligence that decides, based on the lines of code that you changed, what tests should run to verify if your code is breaking anyone. And then, of course, it probably won't surprise you, we have some of the best searching tools in the market, and they apply to our code base as well. So whenever something breaks me, breaks one of my products, I have a very easy way to go and retrieve what change has introduced that breakage, and I have tools to understand when the test started failing, and then I have tools to bisect and understand what changes might have affected that, and I have a history of who submitted those changes, and everything, of course, is linked to our directory, so I then can very quickly open a chat message with them and tell them, hey, you broke me. I'm going to roll back your CL, and minutes later, we are back in business. It is, once you start learning how to use it, it's incredibly powerful, and you can go back years. I can see the state of the Google code base years in the past. I'm reasonably sure I can see the original code base as well. I've never tried to go that deep, but I'm pretty sure I can see at least parts of it. So that's great. And then, of course, the other area where we are really, I think, blessed is in the video conferences, video collaboration environments. From my desk, I can book a room in any building anywhere in the world to have a conversation with someone, and I can access a lot of facilities to in other countries if I need to, which is also great. And I can share my screen, I can share my code, I can share my terminal. All these things are great tools for collaboration.
Thank you so much.
Of course. And then, of course, I imagine some of your students, I'm not a big machine learning and artificial intelligence person. I like understanding every bit that's on the wire, but we have a lot of machine intelligence that helps you understand why your tests are failing, whether or not your test coverage is appropriate. Lots of machine learning applied there.
Right.
Hi, Riccardo. I'm Hyun Cha, one of the TA of the network equity course, and I have a little question that, as I know, there are two big public cloud service, Amazon Web Service and the Google Cloud Platform, and I've used both of in the past on some projects that requires the cloud service, and then I'm a little curious about the main difference between them. So actually, I briefly searched on the internet, and this says that AWS does not have a layered networking framework, but Google Cloud does. So can you explain a little more specifically about the networking part?
Yeah, certainly. And I should mention there's also Microsoft. It's another big player in cloud as well. Azure, yes, and Google. One has to be honest. It's not the first one nor the second one in terms of market share, but we are the fastest growing. So I take pride in that. Yes, the main differences. Amazon is older. They started earlier, and they have a very rich feature set. Almost too rich, if you ask me. I haven't used them in a while, but a few years ago, when I was still using them for some personal projects, it was almost difficult to navigate the amount of services that they were offering. And Google tends to have a little bit more of a simplistic approach to the kind of services we offer. Although, we are starting to get pretty rich as well. The area where I'm most proud of Google Cloud is certainly networking. Both from the performance that you get from the outside and the stuff that we have from the inside. The kind of performance, the kind of efficiency, it's really incredible. I think it's one of our biggest selling points. The other selling point, of course, is storage. S3 is a great storage system, don't get me wrong, but Bigtable and BigQuery, which is on top of Bigtable, are two of Google's biggest achievements. And the velocity and the scale at which we can store and process data, it's really mesmerizing. More recently, I think the battleground is on security. I don't want to comment too much because there's a lot going on in security, but cloud and security is really it's the battleground on which the next couple of years, 2 or 3 years of cloud will compete. We're working a lot, and we're working on very interesting, comprehensive security policies and security products. And we do have great engineers. Our security teams, I don't know if you're familiar with Team Zero, for example, but our security experts are really great.
Cool. So one last very important question, Riccardo. What's your favorite gelato flavor?
I highly recommend, again, you can't live without coffee. So affogato is really what you want. The gelato flavor, it's not as important as the fact that there must be some coffee around it and some really good Scotch whiskey on top of it. Vanilla goes best with these two things.
All right, you're speaking like a true professional. So thank you, Riccardo, for your time, and I think you gave a lot of good technical insights, but also advice for students as they're developed. Can you give us some concluding general advice to the students?
If they are approaching the decision of what to do next, I think really go with your passion. Don't focus too much on what is the next big thing, because you may not be a good part of that next big thing if you don't do it with passion. So really understand what you like, and to do that, you just have to take every experience and opportunity. So if you have an internship, if you have an opportunity to work in a research lab, just take them. Don't worry if it's the best thing for you. If it's new, it's going to teach you something. If they're looking for being successful in interviewing, practice. If someone is thinking of interviewing at Google and want to know more about the interviewing process, feel free to reach out to me. I'm sure SJ will know how to reach me, and I'm happy to give you insights.